The smell of roasted turkey and underlying tension filled the dining room of our family's Victorian mansion. Snow fell softly outside the tall windows, adding a deceptively peaceful backdrop to what I knew would be anything but a peaceful Christmas dinner. I'm Alexander Bennett, though my family insists on calling me Alex. Their way of diminishing everything about me, right down to my name. At 29, I'm the youngest of 3 children and the only one who chose to stay in the family home after graduating college. Not out of necessity, but strategy. A fact my brother Timothy was about to learn the hard way. The antique grandfather clock struck 6 as our housekeeper Maria brought in the last of the side dishes. She caught my eye briefly, a knowing look passing between us. She'd been here 30 years, long enough to see every family drama unfold, including what was about to happen tonight. Alex, my mother Margaret called from her end of the table, do try to sit up straight. The Hendersons are joining us later for dessert. Her voice carried that familiar note of perpetual disappointment, as if my very posture was letting down the entire Bennett legacy. I adjusted my position slightly, smoothing the napkin across my lap. The Hendersons, of course. Mother's attempt to set me up with their son Bradley. Another suitable match I was supposedly lucky to attract, despite my peculiarities, as she called my career choices. Timothy sat across from me, his wife Diane beside him, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine spread. He'd taken over father's investment firm 3 years ago, a position he'd neither earned nor deserved. But in our family, being the firstborn son trumped little things like competence or ethics. My sister Catherine sat near the end, tapping away at her phone despite mother's repeated glares. She'd blown through 2 trust funds and 3 marriages, yet somehow remained the sensible daughter because at least she tried to settle down. Before we begin, Father announced from the head of the table, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. He set down his wine glass with practiced precision. The future of this house. Ah, here it came. I'd been waiting for this moment for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days. As you know, he continued, this property has been in the Bennett family for 4 generations. With the recent changes in the market, certain decisions need to be made. What he meant was that his investment firm, now Timothy's investment firm, had lost several major clients. The kind of losses that made people whisper at country club gatherings. The kind that forced selling of assets. Timothy leaned forward, unable to contain his smirk. What Father's trying to say, Alex, is that it's time for you to find your own place. We're selling the house. I took a small sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Is that so? Don't act surprised, Catherine chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. You can't have expected to live here forever. Some of us have actual families to think about. By actual families, she meant her latest fiancé and his 3 children from 2 previous marriages. The fiancé who, unknown to her, had already blown through most of her remaining trust fund on a failed yacht charter business in Miami. The market's quite good right now, Timothy continued, his voice taking on that condescending tone he perfected since childhood. I have several interested buyers already. High-end developers. They'll probably tear it down, build luxury condos. Mother's hand flew to her throat. Tear it down. But Timothy, darling, this house is just a house, Mother. He cut her off. Progress demands change. Besides, Alex needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. I set down my water glass carefully. That's interesting, Tim. Tell me more about these developers. He preened slightly, always eager to show off his business acumen. Prestigious firms. Top dollar. Of course, you wouldn't understand the complexities of such deals. Actually, I said, reaching for my briefcase beside my chair, I understand completely. That's why I had my team research them thoroughly 3 months ago when they first approached me. The room went still. Your team. Father's voice carried the first note of uncertainty I'd heard in years. I smiled, pulling out a thick folder. Yes, my legal team. You see, they were quite concerned about the potential buyer's history of fraudulent dealings, especially given my position as the property owner. Timothy's fork clattered against his plate. What are you talking about? Oh, did I forget to mention? I laid the property deed on the table. I bought this house 2 years ago, through a holding company, of course, when Great Aunt Adelaide's estate was settled. Impossible, Father snapped. The house was tied up in the family trust. It wasn't for sale. The trust you borrowed against repeatedly to cover the firm's losses. I raised an eyebrow. The same trust you defaulted on last spring. The bank was quite happy to sell to a buyer with liquid assets and excellent credit. They particularly appreciated my cash offer. Mother's face had gone pale. Catherine's phone slipped from her fingers. You're lying, Timothy sputtered. This is some kind of joke. Would you like to see the documentation? I opened the folder. I have everything here. The deed, the transfer records, even the receipts for the property taxes I've been paying while letting you all live here rent-free. But your job, Mother whispered. You work in that little tech startup. I laughed softly. That little tech startup went public last year. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and one of the founding partners. Did none of you ever actually Google my company? We're valued at just over $4 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding another pristine layer to the grounds I legally owned. So, I continued, about that 1-week notice to vacate. I think 24 hours is more appropriate, don't you? After all, progress demands change. Timothy's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. We're family. Family? I pulled out another document. Like when you forged my signature to access my trust fund last year. Or when you mortgaged this house to cover your gambling debts. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Diane suddenly became very interested in her napkin. How did you? Father started. No, I finished for him. I know everything. Every loan, every fraud, every secret account. And after tomorrow, so will the SEC. The grandfather clock chimed again, its sound echoing through the stunned silence. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come. One that would shake the Bennett family to its very core. Now, I said calmly, let's talk about what really happened to Great Aunt Adelaide's original will, the one that disappeared the night before she died, the one Timothy visited her about in the hospital. Timothy's face went from red to white faster than I thought possible, because he knew what was coming next would destroy not just his reputation, but everything he'd schemed and stolen to build. Maria quietly began clearing the untouched dinner plates, her movements precise and careful, like someone trying not to startle a room full of cornered animals. The turkey had gone cold, forgotten in the wake of my revelation. The night before Great Aunt Adelaide died, I continued, pulling out a USB drive. The hospital security cameras recorded something interesting. Would you like to see it, Timothy? Or should I just describe how you threatened our dying aunt to change her will? Stop. Timothy's voice cracked. His perfectly pressed collar suddenly seemed to be choking him. Why stop? Isn't this what family dinners are for? Sharing memories? I connected the drive to my tablet. The footage is quite clear. You entering her room at 11:42 p.m. The nurse's statement confirmed she heard you shouting. Something about deserving the inheritance more than your worthless sisters. Mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Timothy, what is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped. She's making this up. Really? I turned the tablet screen toward them, because the video shows you leaving with documents at 12:37 a.m., and exactly 6 hours later, Aunt Adelaide was dead. The original will, mysteriously missing. The new one, hastily signed under suspicious circumstances, left everything to you. Catherine had gone very still. The inheritance, the money you loaned me for my divorce settlement, was stolen. I finished for her. All of it. From the estate, from my trust fund, from this house's equity. Timothy's been running a pyramid scheme for years, using family assets to cover his trading losses. Diane suddenly stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Sit down, I said firmly. You helped him forge the documents. The SEC has your signatures too. She sank back down, color draining from her face. You've been investigating us. Father's voice carried more bewilderment than anger. Your own family? No, Father. I've been protecting myself. Ever since I found the original will in Timothy's office safe 3 years ago. Timothy's head snapped up. You broke into my office? Actually, your secretary let me in. Remember Linda? The one you fired for incompetence when she threatened to expose your affair with the investor's liaison? I smiled slightly. She's been working for my tech company ever since, keeping excellent records. The sound of Mother's wine glass shattering against the floor made everyone jump. Maria moved to clean it up, but I raised my hand, stopping her. Leave it, I said softly. In fact, Maria, why don't you take the rest of the evening off? With full pay, of course, and don't worry about your job. You'll still have one after they're gone. You can't just. Father started, but I cut him off. Can't just what? Protect loyal employees? Make business decisions about my own property? Don't worry, Father. Maria's contract is ironclad, unlike the documentation Timothy used to embezzle from the family firm. I opened another folder, spreading out bank statements and transaction records across the table like a grotesque Christmas dinner centerpiece. 14 shell companies, I narrated, pointing to highlighted sections. 23 fraudulent accounts. Over $12 million in misappropriated funds. Did you really think nobody would notice? I was protecting our legacy, Timothy shouted, mask finally cracking. The firm was failing. Father's investments were worthless. Timothy. Father's face had gone purple. What have you done? What you taught me to do, Timothy snarled. Appearances matter more than anything, right? Keep up the family name at any cost? Cost? I laughed softly. Let's talk about cost. The cost of sending me to boarding school at 12 because I was difficult. The cost of cutting off my college fund because I chose tech instead of finance. The cost of believing Timothy's lies about my mental instability when I tried to warn you about his schemes. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the snow had begun falling harder, nature's curtain drawing across the estate I now controlled. But here's the real cost. I turned back to them. Tomorrow morning, the SEC will receive documentation of every fraudulent transaction. The FBI will get proof of Timothy's involvement in Great Aunt Adelaide's death. And the family firm will be revealed as the house of cards it's become. You'll destroy us, Mother whispered. No, Mother. You did that yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights. Catherine, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. What about me? My trust fund is gone, I confirmed. Timothy emptied it months ago, just like he did with mine, just like he's been doing with the firm's pension fund. By the way, your new fiancé? He knows. He's been helping Timothy hide the money offshore. Catherine's face crumpled. Another expensive engagement ring turned to dust. But I'm not completely heartless, I continued. I've arranged for a small stipend for you, Catherine. Enough to live modestly while you finally finish that degree you abandoned. And Mother, there's a comfortable condo waiting in Palm Beach. Your social circle won't be quite as grand, but you won't be destitute. And me? Timothy's voice was barely audible. I smiled, the same cold smile he'd given me countless times over the years. You get exactly what you deserve. A 6S8 cell with a lovely view of the exercise yard. Unless, of course, you'd like to make a deal. Hope flickered across his face. What kind of deal? Tell them the truth, I said simply. All of it. About Adelaide, about the firm, about every scheme and lie. Give them closure before you go away. Timothy looked around the table, at our shell-shocked parents, at his trembling wife, at Catherine's tears. For the first time in his life, he had no moves left to make. It started 6 years ago, he began, voice shaking, when Father made me CEO. But what he revealed next would shake our family's foundation even more than my previous revelations. Because Timothy's crimes went far beyond money. They struck at the very heart of what had torn our family apart decades ago. Timothy's confession spilled out like poison from an old wound, each word making our mother flinch, our father age, and Catherine's tears fall faster. The firm was already failing when Father made me CEO, he continued, staring at his hands. His investments in oil had tanked. The real estate venture in Dubai was a disaster. But we kept up appearances, using Adelaide's trust fund to cover the gaps. My sister's money, Father whispered. You stole from my sister? You taught me well, Father. Timothy's laugh was hollow. Remember when Alex was 12? When she found those irregularities in the family books? I remembered. It was the reason they'd sent me to boarding school. Difficult child, needs discipline, they'd said. In reality, I discovered their first round of financial fraud. But that's not the worst part. Timothy's voice dropped lower. The night Adelaide died, she knew everything. She'd hired a forensic accountant, was planning to expose us all. Mother's face went ash white. Us. All. Tell them, Father. Timothy's eyes had taken on a strange, fevered gleam. Tell them who really started this. Who taught me how to create shell companies, hide assets, manipulate accounts? Father stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. Be quiet. No. I cut in. Let him finish. Though I already know, I found your old records, Father. The ones hidden in the false bottom of your study drawer. Records going back 30 years. Catherine made a small, broken sound. Daddy? It was for the family. Father's voice cracked. Everything I did was to maintain our position, our name, including sending me away. I asked quietly, including believing Timothy when he said I was unstable, turning the whole family against me when I tried to warn you about the firm's collapse. You were too smart, he whispered, too observant, just like Adelaide. The truth hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. So when she threatened to expose you, I continued, Timothy handled it, just like you taught him to handle problems. But he got sloppy, left evidence. I pulled out one final document, a hospital record showing elevated levels of potassium in Adelaide's last blood test. Levels that couldn't be explained by her condition. Did you know about this part, Father? Did you know your son graduated from fraud to murder? Mother ran from the room, the sound of her retching echoing from the hallway. Diane sat frozen, her expensive manicure digging half-moons into her palms. I didn't. Father stumbled back. Timothy, tell me you didn't. The family name? Timothy's voice was eerily calm now. Above all else, protect the family name. Your words, Father. Your lessons. I stood, gathering my documents. The police will be here in approximately 10 minutes. I called them before dinner. You're having us arrested? On Christmas? Catherine's voice rose hysterically. No, Catherine. I'm having Timothy and Father arrested. You and Mother have different consequences. I handed her an envelope. Your new apartment lease, first year paid, along with enrollment papers for the community college nearest your new home. Time to build a real life. She took the envelope with trembling hands. Why? Why help me? Because you were a victim too. Spoiled and enabled. Yes, but not criminal. Not like them. The sound of sirens grew in the distance. Timothy made a move toward the door, but I pulled out my phone. The house is surrounded. My security team has been in place all evening. Security team? Diane finally spoke. Did you really think I'd confront financial fraudsters and a murderer without protection? I smiled slightly. I learned something from this family after all. Always have a backup plan. The front door opened, and heavy footsteps filled the hallway. 2 police detectives entered the dining room, followed by FBI agents. Mr. Bennett, Mr. Timothy Bennett, the lead detective announced. You're under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and in your case, Timothy, the suspected murder of Adelaide Bennett. As they read them their rights, Mother returned, leaning heavily against the doorframe. I walked to her, holding out another envelope. The condo in Palm Beach, I said softly. It's peaceful. Far from all of this. There's enough money in the account I've set up to live comfortably, if not extravagantly. Why? She whispered. After everything we did to you. Because hate takes too much energy. And I'd rather use mine building something new. As they led Father and Timothy away in handcuffs, I walked to the window, watching the snow blanket their footprints, erasing all trace of their passage from my property. 3 months later, I stood in the same dining room, but everything had changed. The heavy drapes had been replaced with light, modern panels. The oppressive oil paintings of stern Bennett ancestors had given way to local artists' work. The room was filled with light, air, and the sound of children's laughter. I'd converted the mansion into a technology education center for underprivileged youth. The same rooms that had once hosted cold family dinners now held coding classes, robotics workshops, and entrepreneurship seminars. Maria still ran the household, but now as the center's operations manager, with full benefits and a salary that reflected her true worth. Catherine had finished her first semester of community college with straight A's. She was studying social work, determined to help other families avoid our mistakes. Mother was finding peace in Palm Beach, volunteering at a local library, and, surprisingly, showing talent as a children's storyteller. Timothy and Father were serving their sentences, 20 years for Timothy, 12 for Father. Diane had filed for divorce and turned state's evidence, receiving probation in exchange for her cooperation. The family firm had been dissolved, its legitimate assets used to repay the victims of their fraud. The Bennett name no longer carried weight in financial circles, but I was building a new legacy, one based on innovation, education, and genuine value. I sat in my office, once father's study, reading the latest update from the Education Center's program director. Enrollment had doubled. Our first class of coding students was already receiving job offers. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Got my midterm results. All is again. Thank you for the second chance. I smiled, looking out at the grounds where children now played in the snow, their laughter replacing the echoes of old arguments and older lies. On my desk sat a small photo of Great Aunt Adelaide, her eyes twinkling with the same love of truth and justice that had eventually cost her life, but had also, finally, brought change. The house is still in the family, I told her picture quietly. Just a different kind of family now, a better one. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it felt like renewal rather than burial. Sometimes I'd learned the best revenge isn't destroying what others built. It's building something better in its place. As evening fell, I walked the halls of what was now the Bennett Technology Education Center, listening to the happy chatter of the last students leaving for the day. In the dining room, a group of teenage girls was finishing a coding project, their laptops occupying the same space where that fateful Christmas dinner had shattered my family's illusions. One of them looked up. "Ms. Bennett, can you help us with this algorithm?" I sat down at the table, right where I'd sat 3 months ago, but this time surrounded by hope rather than hostility. "Of course," I said, smiling. "Let's build something amazing. Because that's what real power is. Not the ability to destroy, but the strength to create something new from the ashes of what was lost." And in that, I had finally found my true inheritance. Before heading to the board meeting, I made one crucial stop. The small coffee shop on Oak Street looked exactly as it had 15 years ago. Martha, my grandmother's best friend and former Bennett Industries head of accounting, sat at our usual corner table. "I wondered when you'd visit today," she smiled, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. At 78, her eyes were still sharp as ever. "It's time, isn't it?" I nodded, settling into the chair. "They never knew it was you who taught me how to read corporate financial statements when I was 16. Or that you helped me understand what they were really doing with the company." Martha had been the one who opened my eyes years ago, showing me how my father and Marcus manipulated numbers, hid losses, and played fast and loose with investor funds. She'd been forced into early retirement when she threatened to report their practices. "Your grandmother would be proud," Martha said softly. "She always said you were the one who truly understood the value of things." I touched the emerald pendant at my neck, my grandmother's last gift before she passed. They're about to learn exactly how much I understood. At precisely 1:55 p.m., I walked into Bennett Industries' main conference room. The tension was palpable. Board members sat rigid in their chairs, papers spread before them. My father stood at the head of the table, trying to project confidence. Marcus slouched in a corner, his usual smirk replaced by barely concealed panic. Mom sat near the door, her designer outfit slightly less perfect than usual. She probably spent the morning discovering just how many of her social connections depended on my anonymous donations. "Let's begin," I said clearly, taking a seat directly opposite my father. "This meeting was called," Dad started, but I cut him off. "This meeting was called because I triggered the shareholder rights clause requiring disclosure of significant ownership changes." I opened my laptop. Shall we look at the numbers? The projector hummed to life, displaying a complex web of shell companies, investment vehicles, and stock transfers. 3 years of careful acquisition, all leading to this moment. As of this morning, I continued, these entities collectively own 47% of Bennett Industries' voting shares. The room erupted in murmurs. Dad gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible, Marcus burst out. The family trust controls majority shares. Correction, I smiled. The family trust controlled majority shares until you used them as collateral for your failed Pacific Shores development project last year. A project that, coincidentally, was purchased at bankruptcy auction by one of my investment groups. Marcus went pale. How did you? No? Unlike you, I actually read the financial reports. All of them, including the ones you tried to bury. I turned to the board members. Would anyone like to see the real numbers from the last 3 years? The ones that don't appear in the official statements. This is blackmail, Dad snapped. No, this is business. I stood up slowly. You taught me that, remember? Everything's negotiable. Everything has a price. What do you want? A board member asked, his voice shaking slightly. Transparency, accountability, and I paused, looking directly at my father, a change in leadership. You can't seriously expect, Marcus started. Actually, I can. Because in addition to my shares, I also hold proxy voting rights for the Miller Group. I let that sink in. The Miller Group, our largest institutional investor, controlled another 15% of shares. Dad sank into his chair. Catherine Miller is a personal friend. Catherine Miller is a businesswoman who recognizes competence over nepotism. I clicked to the next slide. She's also aware of certain irregularities in the company's handling of her investments. Irregularities that I've documented extensively. The room fell silent. Years of mismanagement, hidden losses, and questionable deals, all meticulously recorded and ready to be exposed. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. The board will appoint an independent audit committee. Marcus will resign from all operational roles. And Dad? I met his eyes. You'll announce your retirement. Today. Or what? He challenged, but his voice lacked conviction. Or I call the SEC. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the real story behind Wilson Holdings' collapse, and the Thompson development deal, and about a dozen other transactions I've documented. Mom stood up suddenly. Alexander, please. This is your family. Family? I turned to her. Was it family when you watched Dad crush every initiative I brought to the company? When you stayed silent as Marcus took credit for my work? When you threatened to disown me if I didn't give up my house? She flinched. I learned what family meant from Grandma, and from people like Martha Stevens. You remember her, don't you, Dad? The accountant you forced out because she wouldn't cook the books. Dad's face contorted. Martha? She's been helping you. She taught me to see what was really happening in this company, and now everyone else will see it too. I distributed folders to each board member. These contain my formal proposal for restructuring Bennett Industries. You'll find it addresses the company's actual financial position, not the one shown in public statements. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal discussions, votes, and resolutions. By the end, the transformation was complete. Dad announced his retirement for health reasons. Marcus was removed from all operational roles, and I became executive chairperson of the board with a mandate to reform the company's governance and operations. As the board members filed out, Dad remained seated, staring at the papers in front of him. I never thought, he began, that I could do this. I finished. That's been the problem all along. What happens now? Marcus asked, his arrogance finally shattered. Now, you'll retain your shares, but have no operational control. Dad will have a comfortable retirement, provided he stays out of company business. And Mom, I turned to her. The foundation's funding is secure, but its board will be independently managed. And the mansion, she asked quietly. Keep it. Consider it a reminder that sometimes the child you underestimate the most becomes the one you answer to. I gathered my things, pausing at the door. Oh, and Marcus? I bought the Thompson Development Group this morning. Turns out they were eager to sell once they realized who they were really dealing with. The sun was setting as I drove home, to my house, the one I'd refused to sell, the one that had started this whole confrontation. Martha was waiting on my porch, a bottle of champagne in hand. Your grandmother kept a letter for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think today qualifies. The letter was short, written in my grandmother's elegant hand. My dearest Alexandra, I've watched you grow into someone extraordinary, someone who sees beyond the surface of things. The emerald pendant I gave you isn't just jewelry. It's the key to a trust I established years ago, one your father knows nothing about. Martha will explain everything. You've proven you know how to build things. Now show them how to build something better than they ever imagined. All my love, Grandma. I touched the pendant again, understanding finally dawning. Martha smiled. Ready to hear about your grandmother's real legacy? I nodded, opening my door to welcome her in, because sometimes the best revenge isn't about tearing things down. It's about building something new from the ashes of what they never valued. And as for that house they wanted me to sell, it was never about the property. It was about standing my ground, about refusing to be pushed aside one more time. The next morning, a single email went out to all Bennett Industries employees. Change isn't always comfortable, but it's often necessary. Together, we're going to build something extraordinary. And this time, everyone's voice will matter. Regards, Alexandra Bennett, Executive Chairperson, Bennett Industries. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from the battles we win, but from the lessons we teach along the way. My family had spent years teaching me that I wasn't enough. In the end, I taught them that I was more than they ever imagined. And that house they wanted so badly, I think I'll keep it. After all, it's got a perfect view of the Bennett Industries Tower. A daily reminder that sometimes the best response to "we don't want you" is to become the person they can't ignore. Martha raised her champagne glass. To your grandmother. To the future, I corrected, smiling. And to remembering that some things aren't for sale. Not houses, not principles, and definitely not self-worth. The sun set over the city skyline, painting the sky in shades of victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to reshape the company. But for now, sitting in the house I'd refused to give up, I was exactly where I needed to be. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing them exactly who you've become while they were busy underestimating you. And I was just getting started.